All right. Ready?
Let's do it.
All right. Welcome to another episode of Control in the Zone. I'm Kyle Wilson. My co-host here, Danny Healy. Feels what's cracking, man.
Not much. Excited to have Matt on. Smart guy. Feel like I'm going to learn something.
Absolutely. And this guest, we've had a relationship for the last couple of years. Worked firsthand with him. He's phenomenal person, but he's also got a knack for a lot of the newer age metrics, and he really dives into the player development side. Really cares about the athlete, but then really dives into like, all right, what do these metrics really mean? And I think it's going to be a very, very informative episode for you guys. He works for USA Baseball. Closely with the PDP program that they've had. And he certainly embraces the growth mindset that we preach on this show. And we're super, super fortunate to have him here today and pick his brain. So welcome to the show, Matt Pajak.
Thanks, guys.
So Matt, real quick, can you run us through your journey to your current role as the assistant director of the PDP?
Yeah, it's it's an interesting one, that's for sure. So I'll go all the way back to, what would that be? Early 2014 was kind of when I was exploring summer internships for between my junior and senior year of college. And I majored in marketing at Bryant University. So definitely not what I'm doing right now.
Aren't we all? We're not doing anything we went to school for, right?
Poli-sci.
For sure. So I was looking for a summer internship in marketing, and all the things that I was interested in doing, of course, all the cool summer internships, I wasn't connected. So of course, there was no traction with the resume. So kind of out of the blue, an opportunity popped up to intern the Harwich Mariners in the Cape Cod Baseball League. My family, grew up summering on the Cape. We'd go down there for a week, and one year we rented a house, believe it or not, from Paul Gallup, who at the time was the commissioner of the Cape Cod Baseball League. So there was kind of like a connection formed there early on when I was a kid before I kind of knew anything. And then, fast forward to 2014, get connected to Mary Henderson, president of the Harwich Mariners, through Paul Gallup about an internship. He kind of set up a phone call. I thought it was going to be an interview, and it just kind of turned into, if you can find a job here this summer, we'd love to have you. Turns out that it's not super easy to find a job on the Cape. And it's not super easy to find housing. That's probably the hardest component to it, because obviously the Cape's not all that big. So they're like, yeah, we'd love to have you. It's unpaid. It's kind of like a volunteer position. I would say that it's more of a volunteer type deal versus a traditional internship, because it's everything from, working the grill, concessions, selling 50-50 raffle tickets, all that fun stuff. So got to work between classes, reached out to a golf course, got my summer job lined up pretty much. And they were like, well, you can have the job if you can find a place to live. And I was like, I guess it's really not that easy, and everyone knows that. I'll figure it out. So I did. Got connected through a guy in Orleans who knew someone in Brewster who lived across the street from a woman by the name of Mary Cullen, who was willing to take me in for the summer. So yeah, ended up in Brewster, living right in between White House Field, where the Mariners played, and the golf course in Chatham. And that was, one of the best summers, I guess, of my life, just being around baseball, 10 minutes from the beach any given day. Obviously it doesn't hurt that there's, some of the best ice cream probably in the whole world on Cape Cod. So appreciate that. So yeah, I mean, it was just kind of like, intuition. So you go to the ballpark every day, and you're not getting paid to do this, and you got to take the trash out. And sometimes, don't tell anyone at Monomoy High School, you got dip spit going down your leg when you're taking out the trash. And it's like, well, despite all that, it just feels right to be around a ball field and you enjoy it. So that was kind of like the first time for me where I was like, well, maybe this is something I want to do. So I go back for my senior year at Bryant and get kind of to December, January, applying for jobs. And again, nothing's really hitting. Stayed in contact with Paul Gallup, who was the commissioner. And he said, if nothing, lines up for you at graduation, you can come back and work with me again. So I did. I ended up doing that. I graduated, went back to the Cape, ended up being kind of like his intern, managed all of the contracts for the league. There's temp players coming in and out at all times. You got permanent players. You got, guys that go play for Team USA and then come back. So kind of a lot to manage on that end. At the same time, I was working at a fish market, 10-hour days on your feet, threw away a lot of shirts, 2 pairs of shoes, and a hat at the end of the summer because everything just starts to smell like fish. So, you kind of realize that, like, if you're willing to do that and then not get paid for the baseball element, because I was doing all of that just so that I could go, to a couple games every night. Again, intuition, internal compass, like, this is where I want to be. This is what I enjoy doing. So kind of in my head, I was like, how can I find a way to get paid to do something that I enjoy? That summer, I was, fortunate to get connected to people like Randy Flores, who at the time was working with On Deck Digital, and now he's the AGM and the scouting director for the Cardinals. So, you talk to guys like that, Matt Hyde with the Yankees, John Green, who actually I think now is the titled global cross-checker for the Dodgers, which is pretty gangster. Aren't too many global cross-checkers floating around, but and then Steve Sanders was the assistant director of scouting for the Red Sox at the time, and I think now he's AGM with Pittsburgh. So, the Cape is just such a great place to meet people, and all those people kind of gave me their time, which I'm very fortunate for, and kind of planted the seed in their own right. So I go home that fall. I'm looking for jobs. I was blogging about fantasy football, and I actually got all the way down the road with DraftKings to a point where they made a job offer right around December. And it was at the time when they just got shut down in New York, and I wasn't really sure what the future of DraftKings was going to be. So, again, intuition, something just didn't feel right, and decided not to take that job. And a couple weeks later, I was kind of like, all right, I'm back to square one. I don't really have anything to offer a major league club, not really sure how to get in, but I know that I want to. I'm on Twitter one day. I see an advertisement for a USA Baseball camo hoodie. I click on it. I'm on the USA Baseball website. Somehow end up on the bottom where it says employment opportunities. Find a 9-month internship in program development working on the NHSI and NTIS. Because it was 9 months, I was like, it'd probably be worth my while. If I get this, to relocate. It's not like it's a 3 or 4 month position. So I applied for it, and within 2 or 3 days had set up a Skype interview with, I don't know if you guys know Mark Dvorak.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
So Mark Dvorak and Kevin Kelly, sitting on my couch at home and doing a Skype interview, and 2 or 3 days later, they offered me the position. So I guess I was fortunate in that regard. I guess I was kind of an emergency hire because someone had accepted the position back in December and then backed out, and then the position got reposted. So accept the position, and then within a week and a half, I was renting my first apartment over the phone and packing up as much as I could fit into my Honda Civic to drive to North Carolina for the first time. So
welcome to the baseball world, my man.
Yeah. So that was just to get in the door. And then 9 months, working with Mark, NHSI, NTIS. Oh man, we had as many as like 5 of us living in a 2-bedroom apartment at one point. 2 guys in the living room, 1 guy in the dining room. We didn't have a dining room table, so that was a lot of fun. And then at the end of the 9 months, I get approached by Rick and Sean Campbell about a new initiative, prospect development pipeline. kind of saw the opportunity in that, because I had also, at the same time, I was having job interview elsewhere for a more full-time position with benefits. And here they're like, well, we can offer you a 12-month internship on top of your 9-month internship. I was like, as unattractive as that sounds, the opportunity was attractive, right? Follow the internal compass, accept that position. And then after 4 months as an intern there, after our first 5 events, I got brought on as the assistant director for the program. So ever since March 2017, have been in my role.
Sweet. Well, yeah, we've gotten to see it work firsthand, and you guys are very progressive, always looking to find as much information on players to provide to, whether it's you guys just internally or different organizations or the players themselves, so they know areas to improve. But going back to Harwich, pretty funny. Both my cousins, my aunt lives in Harwich, and both my cousins were bat boys for like the last 8 summers down there. So hopefully we weren't stuffing them in lockers, but you're a nice guy. I know that wasn't the case, but so
Awesome.
What inspired you to end up going back for your master's degree at Georgetown? You got a master's in sports industry management.
Sure. So I think there's kind of like 2 reasons why you'd go back to get more education. Curiosity and, specific application. And I think for me, my undergrad was not focused in sport. So I viewed that next opportunity as a way to explore, I guess more structured education in sport. So I think it was more curiosity as opposed to specific application at the time. I think curiosity is super important, for anything in general. I mean, like, you don't just have to go, get into a structured grad program, like, reading books. There's so many resources online. Like, if you're curious, you're going to find all kinds of different ways, to keep pushing yourself forward. And that's kind of a trait that I don't think can be taught. So it's definitely something we look for in interns, but we can get back to that later. But so I go to Georgetown, there's 10 classes, and it's like anything else. You kind of gravitate towards 3 or 4 of them that are more interesting to you. And it was kind of a way for me to focus my energy and focus kind of where my interests lie in sport. So if anything, it was kind of more of a narrowing of sorts. And that's, I think that's just kind of it. If you're curious and you want to learn more and you're trying to figure out what you want to do, you're going to keep exploring opportunities to try and, narrow your focus and keep yourself on the path. So that was kind of it.
Yeah, and that goes back to your internal compass too, right? You're always trying to, make yourself better, just to grow yourself, but then also grow the people around you too. And I think that that is a unique and a great characteristic to have. We always want to push and get better and get better and get better. And then you find yourself in the moment, you probably don't realize how much you have grown, but then you look back, 5-6 years, and even back to your days in Harwich, you're probably like, holy cow, I've come a long way. That's for sure. But you mentioned when you're talking about, kind of your path to getting to the PDP or to your current role, you mentioned On Deck Digital, and I have never heard of that. So what exactly is On Deck Digital? And the reason I ask is because there might be some listeners here that, are looking to get into baseball and looking to do some other things. It might be a good company for them to look out for. So can you explain a little bit what On Deck Digital is?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if this is a good or a bad thing for On Deck Digital. I don't really know what their current status is, but they were kind of to my understanding, the trailblazers to what is now Synergy.
Okay.
So the solution that they were providing for the Cape Cod Baseball League was, high quality video from, both on top of the dugouts, behind home plate, for all the clubs. And then, Randy obviously moved over. It was actually the end of that summer he took the scouting director position with the Cardinals. And then I kind of lost track of where On Deck was at. And obviously we work with Synergy. Synergy does is pretty awesome with all the different camera angles and the way that they can basically take a 100-pitch start and you can watch it in less than 4 minutes. Like, so I think they were kind of a trailblazer, and I don't know if they're still kicking around, but
yeah, and synergy is heavily involved in the collegiate game right now. A lot of big time universities are using it, and I think they're even diving into a little bit of the pro side as well. I know a lot of the scouting departments use that as a service to, like you said, catch a game or catch a start in 4 minutes, as opposed to, they can't go see everybody, these scouting directors, that's for sure. So having the ability to do that is pretty cool. So getting in with these tech companies is something that is certainly important if you have an interest in getting into baseball. But quick question for you. Do you always envision yourself, working in baseball? I know you kind of tried to dabble in other things like DraftKings, and it just always hasn't, I guess, felt right for you. Again, going back to that internal compass. So is baseball something that has always been your passion and something you continually want to stay in for the rest of your career?
Oh man, I mean, so this is gonna sound it's gonna sound different, but I've never really had a plan, and that's not gonna work for everybody. But for me, I think like if you have, you say like, oh, in 10 years I want to be X. Well, there's so many different variables in our lives that impact the course of whatever we're doing. So if you say like, okay, in 10 years, I want this title and I want to be this, you ask a lot of kids, interns, whatever, job interviews, like, where do you see yourself in 10 years? And they're like, oh, I want to be, the GM of this club. I want to be a GM of a major league team. Well, that's great, but you don't really know what goes into being a GM. You don't really know, all the different things that could happen in your life between now and then. COVID's a perfect example. Like if I had goals for this year, and they were dependent on me getting out and working and doing everything that I did last summer, that wasn't going to happen. So I can do one of two things. I can have those goals, and now I'm disappointed or I'm frustrated or I've got anxiety because I'm now off the track or I'm behind. Or I could attain those goals, which is like, okay, so I want to be X in 5 years. If I get there, then all I've done is exactly what I expected to do. Right. So for me, instead of setting long-term goals, it's just kind of like follow the internal compass, stay around good people, and then, obviously set your eyes on something. And you don't know what you're going to accomplish. You don't know what you're going to get into 2-3 years down the road. And for me, that's what keeps life exciting. It's kind of that unpredictability. I know there's a lot of people out there that try and reduce uncertainty in their lives as much as possible, but for me, I kind of embrace it.
Yeah, and I think, it's important to have those macro goals, right? Like we all want to get to a certain point. But it's just like we go into coaching our kids, we all want to hit 350, we all want to hit 20 bombs and have, 50 plus RBIs. And it's okay to have those goals. But I think the most important part is, what are your goals today? The micro version of, hey, I want to win today. I want to win today. I want to create relationships because I know that's going to open up different paths for me later in my career, because people change and certainly the game of baseball changes as we've all seen in the last 8 to 10 years. So I do like that, and I resonate well with that. If you had asked me 5 years ago where I wanted to be, it's certainly not in the shoes, or I could never have predicted I would be in the spot that I am now. And I know Danny's probably the same way, but I think it is important to have those little micro goals each day, and that helps you kind of embrace things like this crazy COVID stuff that's going on, and just allow you to do the best of your ability for that day, for that week, and not worry about the long term. And then the last thing I'll say on that is, it's always easy to say, I want to be a GM, I want to do this. And the further you are away from a situation, the easier it might seem and the less complex it might seem. And there's certainly there's a lot of complexities that go into a position like that you probably aren't even close to being aware of until you actually get into that seat. So I love what you said there. To dive into the prospect development pipeline, the PDP. Can you explain to our listeners what exactly the PDP is?
Yeah. So, obviously a lot of people are familiar with the PDP league. And then, the PDP is almost something entirely separate. I mean, it really is something entirely separate. It was created back in December 2016. That's when it was announced. And then we did kind of a series of events, and it's almost kind of turned into an accessory to our partners. So we've got a partnership with East Coast Pro, MLB Develops. So we do the Breakthrough Series, Dream Series, Hank Aaron Invitational. All of our USA Baseball national team programming. I know the identification events, Cape Cod Baseball League, New England Collegiate League, the Florida Collegiate League, and the Southeast Prospect Showcase that we did in Cary last year, California Collegiate League, Coastal Plain League. So there's kind of all these different touch points from athletes as young as 10U, 11U with USA Baseball identification events, all the way up to Cape Cod Baseball League, Collegiate National Team, and then everything in between. And I think we've been probably most concentrated on that rising senior class high school player over the past 2 to 3 years. And we've traveled all over the country, set up our athletic assessments, and brought our Rapsodo units and DK and right eye vision screens. And we've actually done international stuff too. Been down to the DR twice, Aruba for Venezuelan players, Puerto Rico a couple of times too. So that's more the scope of the PDP. And then everyone obviously knows the PDP league, as you alluded to in a previous discussion. It's not really a replacement for TOS. I just kind of always view, whether it's titled the PDP league or TOS, that's just the 18U identifier for me. I guess it did transition from TOS to PDP league. I wouldn't say that it replaced it. I would just say that it's the next iteration, and whatever that looks like moving forward, obviously we're going to need an 18U identifier. So
and that's Tournament of the Stars for those that were unsure what we were talking about with TOS. That's when I was in high school. That was the big USA National Complex event with all the studs throwing 95 in 10th, 11th, 12th grade.
Yeah, and if there's a database of athletes and their metrics, the mecca of all, it's probably what you guys have calculated, because you probably have seen certain athletes. Now, I know you've only been doing it for a couple of years, but you've kind of seen or been able to kind of track their progress through it. And then as this thing goes on, those 10 and 11-year-olds that you guys are collecting data on, a lot of those guys more than likely will probably be a draft prospect, and we'll get to the PDP, and we'll get to the 18U national teams, and you guys can see kind of their track record of development, which is really cool. And that's something that all of us in player development, are trying to get to. How do we track these athletes, and how do we create player development plans, to help them get better? And it doesn't stop, once they get to 18 and past that. Once they get to their collegiate programs and their professional programs, it should continue. So it's really cool what you guys certainly are doing.
Yeah. I agree 100%. And just the reasoning behind it is just like, we can create better athletes in the game of baseball. And I think that that's been a big push in the last several years. And it's not a ton of, I met the guy at the ABCA conference, but not a ton of David Wells in the game anymore. It's a lot of really quick twitch athletes. And looking at last night, first round of the draft, the shortened draft this year, 33 of the 37 picks had some tie into the PDP league. So that's really awesome that you guys had some involvement and obviously identified, these guys are pretty good players. But so I'm sure there are different aspects of your job in the PDP, but whether it's educating the players on what the metrics mean, or whether it's just seeing all the raw data at the end of a workout, I'm sure that you all lean towards favorite parts of that job. Is there a certain concentration or part of the game in your role that you're most passionate about?
Well, I think first and foremost, it's the people. that's probably why I do my job. And I just get to be around people that I care about. And it's kind of a vehicle for that, every single day, whether it be, the players, coaches, scouts, coworkers, the interns, whatever that looks like. But yeah, it's pretty special when I think about it, especially when I have conversations with people that I went to school with back home. And they live in Boston or wherever they live, and everyone that they interact with on a daily basis either lives in Boston or is someone that they went to school with. And then I've got now like friends all over the country. I could go to Northern California, Southern California, Georgia, Texas, Mississippi, and have a bed to sleep on, and with all these people that I've encountered, over the past 3 or 4 years and built relationships with. It's pretty special, because it gives you a much more, worldly view. I've been, polishing up my Spanish with a Venezuelan kid that I met in Aruba. He's 16, 17 years old, connected with him on WhatsApp, and, all of a sudden, like, I've got an idea of what's going on in Venezuela, and I'm able to teach him so much about what's going on in the United States. He's got questions about everything he's seeing on the news, in regards to everything that's going on in the country right now. And, I'm kind of able to give him a more realistic look of, hey, this is what it actually is versus this is what you're being, shown through whatever's available in Venezuela. So it's pretty special. And I think it's something that, a lot of us probably take for granted, is just how much our world opens up once you start, really getting into working in the sport.
For sure. And I mean, I know that USA Baseball specifically is really trying to grow the game and keep it a global game. And I mean, I feel like obviously right now the state of baseball isn't at its greatest because they're not playing, but the caliber of play on the field is people that say the game's not what it used to be. I think that's insane. There are better athletes on the field than there have been in my lifetime, especially the legal way, unlike the late 90s. But when was the PDP created? And I know you guys have changed venues for where you host those events a lot of times, but you guys also have to travel. Besides that type of stuff, how has the PDP evolved since year one, and how has your role or duties changed since you first started with the PDP?
So the first 5 events were like standalone events. They were called PDP Premier events. And pretty much what we do is we structured out the morning for all of the athletic testing, the vision testing, and then we would transition to a BP and an IO, have break for lunch for a half hour, and then play, a showcase style 7 to 9 inning game, depending on how much pitching we had in the afternoon. And that was a PDP Premier event. And we put together all of that. At the time I was, calling umpires to make sure we had umpires come in, staffing the event with any coaches and wherever we were at. If it was Bradenton, Florida, I'm calling up high school coaches that I know down there to come out and help us out, throw BP, kind of coach the teams during the showcase game. And, largely my responsibility as an intern at the time during the event was to run 40 players through a 20-minute performance vision screen with really unfortunate Wi-Fi. So that was not a whole lot of fun. Our interns have it much better now with right eye because the setup is a lot easier and it only takes 5 to 6 minutes to run a player through. And we also don't vision screen every pitcher because it's not really necessary. So running, I can remember being in the underbelly of the AAA stadium for the Atlanta Braves back in 2017, and because of the Wi-Fi, Will Banfield got drafted by the Marlins 2 years ago. Had to take the right eye test 3 times. So I was legitimately sitting there with Will Banfield for close to 45 minutes because he'd get 15 minutes through and then it would like freeze or the connection would cut out and then we'd have to start over again. And like I remember feeling really bad for him, but then at the same time I was like, oh man, this is brutal. Because obviously we had 35 guys, 40 guys at that event that we had to get through the vision screen. And it's like, it's long enough as it is. But so that was early on. And then that summer I was, kind of tasked with handling logistics as we started to, go to East Coast Pro tryout events. And it wasn't really our event. They were in charge of the baseball stuff. And it was kind of like, we're going to fit in and try and be as unobtrusive as possible. And get as much of our testing done as possible and whatever that may look like. So I traveled with Sean Campbell that summer, who's, has since moved on from USA Baseball. And, he kind of handled all the relationships on the partnership side, and I kind of handled all the logistics. And then this past summer 2019, was the first summer where I was out on the road, and I was kind of in charge of, not only the logistics, but also the partnership component wherever we were going, because Sean was no longer with the organization. So I guess the transition went from intern to, all right, you're handling the logistics, to now you're handling the logistics and the partnerships, and kind of in charge of my own traveling team for the whole summer. So it's been a pretty unique, and I've been fortunate to have that opportunity, I guess, to progress, even though the title hasn't changed. And I guess that's like a piece I'd throw out there for anybody listening. Like the title doesn't really mean a whole lot. It's more of the substance. And it's, again, if you have the opportunity to evolve and do new things and get your hands on a whole bunch of different stuff and grow as a leader, I think that for me has always been fulfilling.
Yeah, you can't get wrapped up in titles. It's about, opportunities, and, you guys have grown so much, and hell, the game of baseball has grown so much, and you're at the front end of it when it comes to the cutting edge technology and all that stuff. And throw a little quick one in. Those that are watching the video on YouTube, yeah, Danny's a big circle change guy. So when he holds that baseball, it's always a circle change. I just noticed that. It's kind of funny. But anyways, moving on, in terms of the metrics and the data that you record on your players, can you dive into, I know it's a lot and I know it's very complex, but can you dive into what you guys are testing these athletes that come through the system?
Right. So I guess on the non-athletic side of things, we've got a performance vision screen, which I had alluded to before with the right eye. So that's, how does your vision affect your ability to perform on field or in your sport, right? So right eye's been with us since the start. Their products evolved tremendously, and we're doing that with all the guys. That doesn't require any kind of physical movement or anything like that. We also get a height, weight, grip strength. That kind of takes care of that side of things. And then from the baseball component, there's a lot of things that people are familiar with, Rapsodo pitching, Rapsodo hitting, Diamond Kinetics bat sensors. So we do all of that, BP, bullpens, all the rest. So we get that. And then there's the athletic assessment, which has been, I guess, the thing that has interested me the most, because no one in any sport in the United States is really looking at this information and what it means. And basically, an overview of the athletic assessment, we do a 30-yard sprint with a 10-yard split for the first 14 meters, which is roughly half of that 30-yard sprint. We're getting step-by-step gait analysis, so we can see, how each athlete accelerates into their transition phase, and then right before they get to top speed, you're able to get step-by-step how they're accelerating in feet per second. You can kind of see if there's, a misstep. So basically, you can really dive into the efficiency or lack of efficiency in an athlete. If a guy goes out and runs a 3.89 30-yard split, and he's decelerating with his left leg every time his left leg hits the ground, like traditionally, you just see that a guy has run a 3.89. What I'm seeing is he ran a 3.89 and he's an incredibly inefficient runner, and that's something that can be corrected, in which case there's more in there at present before you even do anything else. right? So those are just kind of some of the things you can dive into on the sprint component. It also starts with a countdown box and a random start for each guy, which is kind of going to mimic a pitcher delivering to the plate. Obviously, at no point in baseball or any sport really are you going on your own first move. You're always reacting to something. So that's kind of a key component to our athletic assessment, is finding ways to engage the brain as well in the athletic assessment. So in place of a 5-10-5 shuttle on the agility front, we do kind of like a four corners man in the box drill. You're looking for a green box. Again, it's completely random. You're engaging the brain. True agility, right? So you got the green box, and then level 2, you're looking for a green 3, and there's all kinds of other different color shapes that are trying to throw you off. And a lot of times you see that guys are slower trying to find the green 3. Their brain's slowing down their body because, again, that's something that you want to look at because brain functionality is so important, again, in all sports and baseball specifically. So then, on the power side of things, we do a vertical jump test with both legs. And then we also do a dynamic broad jump. And then we do single leg jumps, right leg versus left leg. And we're able to look at, power output, right leg versus left leg, and, dynamic stability and balance and all that. So it's overall like the whole thing is, super all encompassing, I guess, of all the different components of athleticism, whether it be speed, reactive strength, power, whatever that looks like. So it's pretty unique.
Yeah. And going back to what I said earlier about, you guys have a database that no one else has in the game of baseball, and maybe even in other sports as well. But I've worked with, 2 major league organizations now, and I'm curious, by your knowledge, is there any other organizations out there that are testing their athletes with this big of a testing platform that you guys are doing with USA?
I think, and you can obviously speak to this because I believe are you both on base U certified?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So you've got the movement component. The movement component, I think, is kind of like the current revolution in baseball. I think it's super important. Learn a lot about the athlete through how they move and, kind of movement efficiency and all that. So you got that component. I think a lot of clubs are currently doing that. I think that's great. Our athletic assessment is more of a performance-based athletic assessment. So I guess the way I would categorize it, me and a coworker went out to LA back in December for the Dodgers Strength and Conditioning Symposium, and they kind of broke down their whole screen. And they go over functional movement first, and then they do kind of sport-specific movement, and then they get into the engine, and then ultimately there's kind of, the conditioning component too. So we would probably fall more in line with the engine based on, what we saw and what they, showed us that the Dodgers do in that component. It's they try and make that as baseball specific as possible. But they're, and it's still like way different than what we're doing. And I think a lot of people look to the Dodgers as, leaders specifically in baseball, especially in a lot of things that they do. So just kind of using that as a benchmark, I would say that there probably aren't a ton of clubs that are, doing what we do or anything. I don't want to say remotely close, but definitely not using the technology that we use.
Yeah, and the Dodgers are cutting edge because they have absolutely no budgetary restrictions when it comes to that. So it's always funny when I talk to coaches in the Dodgers organization. It's like, man, I wish we could, be doing those things, but it must be nice to never have any handcuffs in terms of money or certain resources that you can dive into. So that's probably why they're into that. Cause I know that the systems, I know you guys, I don't know if you still use it, but the Witty Sim system, like those those are really, really expensive. And to be able to scale that with 150 players in your organization and carve out testing times and all that stuff, it's pretty expensive for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, you gotta know exactly what you're doing with that stuff to justify not only the financial investment but the time investment too.
Yeah, and I'm curious, as a guy who's not in pro ball, so I'm not getting anyone in trouble. You, in hearing the pro guys that train here talk, a lot of times they may be anti-tech because they don't get any of their numbers or information. So I'm curious, for you guys, do you filter what you relay to the players that you work with? Like, because these are obviously high-level athletes, or is it more so just to have a database for you guys to know for selecting your teams, or is it going to the draft database? And if you do relay that information, is it kind of a collaborative effort for how they can improve their weaker areas, or just you give them the numbers and kind of explain how they're deficient?
So the biggest problem that we run into is scale. So in the past 3 years, I think I've got something close to like 15,000 unique lines of a different athlete doing some type of PDP testing in this Excel database that we're working off of, right? Because of that much scale, it's impossible to give each athlete the individualized attention they need to be able to break down like, hey, this is specifically, what you need to work on. This is specifically what you need to work on. This is what you need to do. It's something that we'd like to do, but, again, to Kyle's point on, budgetary restrictions, you could bring in someone with the ability to, smart program, like if a player has this deficiency, then they should do this program. And then you would need someone who can come in and, be able to say this is exactly what they should do if they have this deficiency. You have to build all that out. We just don't have the manpower for that. So for us, it's largely lead, the player to the river where the fish are and make sure he has his fishing pole. And that's about as far as we can take him. So we give every player a player report with all of their information. And at that point, we suggest give this to your strength and conditioning guy that you're working with, or your trainer, or if it's a college guy, take it back to school. If there's any questions on this whatsoever, always feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to break it down because it's very sciencey in nature. But yeah, I mean, to your point, we'd love to give an individualized, improvement plan for each guy. We just, we never have that kind of time or ability to do so.
So when it comes to a lot of these things, I know that some players, especially when you get to like the 17U and 18U draft guys, and even Danny alluded to, 33 of the 37 players came through the USA Baseball system in the first round of the draft last night. Is there ever any issues where you're dealing with advisors or agents where they don't want that information? Because some of it can really, really benefit a player's status or stock, but some of it can also raise some areas of concern when it comes to an organization paying someone that much money in the first round. And they may have all of the metric or all of the numbers when it comes to the actual competition. They may be a high velocity guy, 6'6", throws 95 in high school, but he might have these underlying physical conditions that you guys have tested. So how does that process work? Is there ever any, NDAs signed and certain things that would prevent people from accessing that data on a said player?
Yeah. So I guess first thing is that everything and everywhere we go, it's technically optional, for the player. So if a player chooses that they want to opt out of doing the 30-yard sprint, but they want to do the agility stuff, that's fine. If they want to opt out of all of it, that's fine. Most guys do all of it. And we, obviously we share that information with the 30 clubs. We share that information back with the athlete. To your point about, are there advisors that are concerned about, what does this data say and how is it going to be used? I think that's a huge yeah, that's something going on in baseball right now that probably there are undertones in the negotiations between the PA and MLB about having a season right now, where this is kind of like the elephant in the room, because I think that's going to be a topic for the new collective bargaining agreement next year, right? Is how we share data, how we use data, who has access to it. For me, especially on the athletic data, like it's my hope that I find some type of imbalance or deficiency in an athlete, because everything is correctable. All of these guys, wherever we're at, are there for a reason. They can play, right? So in my opinion, if a guy is going to come to this event, he's coming to this event because he's earned the right to be there for his baseball performance. Now, he can go through this assessment or he can not go through this assessment. If he goes through the assessment and we identify that he has something, whether it be a left-right imbalance or something, from a dynamic stability component that he can improve, we can then tell him that, and then he can improve that, and that's going to translate to performance on the field, right? So I would encourage guys to do that, because if he doesn't do the test and we don't find out that he has, his left leg is 15% stronger than his right leg, he still has that. We just don't know about it. And 2 weeks later, he could be going 100% from first to third on a ball to the gap, and he could pull his hamstring. And then, he could think after 2 weeks that, I'm feeling good and I've been cleared to return. And we've seen it. We've seen it with 13 and 14-year-olds where this kid's got, an overuse injury at 13 or 14 years old, and we test him and we can see immediately that this kid shouldn't be on a baseball field. And so, like, hey guys, like, yes, the doctor cleared him, but he's not ready yet. Like, his left leg he's going to get hurt, that right leg is going to get overloaded, and that left leg is, so that I think would be, again, I try and make myself as available as possible to parents, advisors, scouts, whoever it may be, to try and understand what this information means. But I always take the positive spin on it, where there's always something that can be corrected, or again, because these guys are high performing baseball players at whatever event it is, something about them is going to appear on the athletic assessment that they're good at. That's a reason why they're there.
Makes sense. And there's probably no perfect answer to this, but is there some commonalities when it comes to, again, 33 of the 37 drafted come through USA Baseball? Is there some commonalities that you see in those athletes with the testing metrics? And if there is, could you kind of elaborate on what those actually are?
Sure. I think, super high level, a lot of the high school guys that get drafted are, have higher levels of reactive strength and have, much better speed than the college guys that are drafted. And I think that speaks to, MLB scouts' jobs. They do a really good job of identifying, twitch and speed and athleticism. And, those guys get paid out of high school, and then everybody else goes to college. Not to say that athletes don't go to college, because there are plenty of athletes that are all kinds of toolsy, but just not ready to compete on a baseball field yet, that go to college. And then you see them a couple of years later. But I think generally speaking, all these players go to college and they enter a strength and conditioning program for the first time in their life, and they put on 15, 20 pounds. They get a lot stronger, and all of them see a pretty significant bump in power. I'm of the belief that, pretty much all of the college players that you see drafted have the ability and have enough strength and power. You can get them there, whether they have it when they get drafted out of college or, 2 years after that, to hit the ball out of the yard with consistency, if the hit tool's there, if the swing path is there and all that. So, again, profile of the high school guy that drafts and signs is a little bit different. It's, much more speed, reactive strength. You've got some guys in there that have ridiculous power. Jordan Walker is a great example of a guy who, his power stacks up against anybody else in this draft as a high school guy, and that's just like, there's some kind of like super unique insights when you start to kind of dive into it of like, well, this is kind of what it takes, and then you see those guys, and we've had them that we tested in high school. Austin Martin's an example where we tested him in high school, and then, he's going in the top 10 of the draft last night. And, all he needed to do was add some strength. When the strength came, then all of a sudden he's hitting for power instead of just hitting. And, he's worth $5-6 million in the draft. So, super interesting.
Yeah, no doubt. I think they all obviously probably have some component of Twitch to them with the kind of caliber athletes you guys are working with. But I think a lot of the kids that come into our facility, ranging from ages 6 to even the professional or college guys that work out here, may not understand how unprecedented this year has been and how unique the situation's been. It's going to be a big old chapter in history books down the road. So what were your plans for the PDP this summer before the COVID outbreak, and how has the COVID outbreak affected the PDP for this summer and moving forward?
Yeah, so we had hired 12 interns to hit the road with us this summer on 2 different teams, and we were going to go, test all the USA Baseball national teams and national team development programs, identification events. We're going to hit all the East Coast Pro tryouts, the collegiate leagues that I went over before. So it was going to be chock full from as soon as those interns get in the door in May to, end of August, states play, Hank Aaron breakthrough series. It kind of goes on and on and on. We're like pinballs bouncing around the country over the course of the summer. So for that to all just be put on hold and on pause, I mean, it's unfortunate, but now it's kind of, okay, well, things are being canceled, things are being postponed. Some things are being tentatively postponed. What can we still do this year? And I think a lot of that is going to be determined in the next couple of weeks, depending on if Major League Baseball can get on field. So if MLB gets on field, and they're still planning on having an East Coast Pro Showcase in August, that's a place we're trying to be. Obviously East Coast Pro is one of those events that kind of sticks out on the summer calendar for the rising high school senior. It's gonna be a lot of good players there. So if we can get down there with a team of 3 or 4 USA Baseball staff and get those guys, then it's an opportunity for us to, I guess, salvage something in a, again, largely unpredictable year with everything that's going on.
Yeah, and it's still, we don't know exactly what's going to happen here, right? It's kind of ever changing day by day, and obviously all the stuff going on between the union and the owners, and all of these projections and thoughts on kind of the state of the game and all that stuff. It's changing every day. It's almost a headache just to read and to dive into all the complexities of those negotiations. Unfortunately, they're being played out in the media as opposed to behind closed doors, but that is what it is. For those of you that are watching this on YouTube, Matt has a USA Baseball shirt. Obviously, he works for USA Baseball. Can you explain what USA Baseball means and what wearing that shirt or getting out and seeing players wear that uniform, what that truly means to people on staff, coaches on staff, and then more importantly, the players that get invited to participate and play for their country?
Yeah, I mean, speaking as someone who's had a bunch of family in the military, my uncle served in the Marines, and I guess representing your country, especially in sport, is a unique opportunity because there's obviously a lot more visibility to representing your country in sport versus military or other capacities where it's not as visible. So I know for a lot of coaches, a lot of people, a lot of players, whatever it may look like in terms of your tie to USA Baseball, it's an opportunity we're fortunate to have, to be able to put USA Baseball on our shirt, or for the players and the coaches putting USA on the jersey, because honestly, as crazy as everything is in this country, still would not trade the United States of America for anywhere else. I just think about how there's 300 million-ish people in this country, and there's 7 billion people in the world. And when you actually think about the odds of the three of us being born in this country and getting to live the way we live, it's not like by any means great odds, so we're all, I think, very fortunate. We can complain about everything because that's what Americans do. We always find ways to try and push our country to be better, and that's what we're doing right now, and I think it's necessary. But again, I would still rather be here 7 out of 7 days versus anywhere else, because it's just, we're afforded opportunity that nowhere else is afforded. So in regards to USA Baseball and wearing USA on your chest, I think the players and the coaches that get selected for those teams, they get the opportunity to do that. They understand that. And I think so many people, 6 degrees of separation, whether it's immediate family, or a friend of a friend knows somebody who's made the ultimate sacrifice. I think that's something that, again, those people aren't in the media right now saying, well, at whatever baseball player, has made a comment, like, our military will go halfway across the world and not see their family for a full year, and they don't know if they're ever going to see their family again. And we have the privilege to do what we do because of those people. But they don't get the mic when there's discussions about, oh, like, is it safe? Is it not safe to play? So, just perspective. And I think that's something USA Baseball does a really great job of when you get down to that final team, is making sure that every player and every coach that wears the uniform understands what exactly the 3 letters on the front mean. And that's why it's super easy to get the buy-in, because again, you're playing for something that's much, much bigger than yourself.
Yeah, and that's great perspective and very needed right now. And I plan to kind of ask on that, like, how do you get these guys who have not been probably told they're wrong very often, kind of alpha dogs that probably hit 750 in their high school seasons? How do you get the buy-in? But you touched on that. So for me, as a guy who basically works out of an indoor facility and coaches teams on the weekends, managing people has been something that has been kind of a constant growth process. It's always a challenge. And one thing that has always impressed me with USA Baseball is their ability to consistently bring in so many like outstanding staff members from the baseball community with diverse backgrounds in the game. It doesn't matter if you coached at the highest level or the D3 level. They just seem to identify really, really good candidates to bring on. So in terms of like playing background or the level a staff member coached at in his previous employment, where does that fall in terms of the list of importance when you guys are looking for candidates? Is it safe to say that that's not the be all end all for you guys looking at who you're going to hire?
Yeah. And I can speak on this more in terms of the intern group that we've pulled in recently. For me, I think a wide range of backgrounds and interests, and, being from a bunch of different places around the country is super important, because it kind of gives everyone the opportunity to kind of have their own unique voice. We all have our own unique set of experiences, and, that's kind of the power of each person you hire is really the human element, right? So I think the same could be said for, coaching staff, or, any kind of hiring that you make. You're hiring the human being. And I guess I'll echo something that I heard it a couple weeks back. One of your guests talked about like if we hire the right human being, we can teach them, whatever they need to know. We can teach them the technical expertise. So it's about finding the right people, the people that are curious, the people that are interested, the people that are going to ask the next question, I guess. The people that are going to care about their job. If you get those people in the door, then you can teach them, and that's our job. That's our job as leaders, is to teach them what they need to know to be successful in their job. Some interns, some coaches, if it's a coaching staff, are going to be ahead in certain things, but it's, again, the responsibility of the leader to teach what they need to know. And I've heard that in other corners of the baseball world, where it's like, in scouting, the most important thing is to kind of find the intangibles of a scout, and then you can teach anybody how to evaluate. It's like anything else, it comes with practice. So specifically when hiring our interns, for me, there's no, I prefer a wide range of study and past experience and all that, because I think that lends to a potentially really unique identity for the group, because it allows people from a bunch of different backgrounds to express themselves, be themselves. And I personally am a huge proponent of people being weird, because let's face it, we're all weird. And if we're able to put our egos aside and kind of embrace that, and you can create a culture where people embrace people being weird, everyone's much more comfortable. When you're much more comfortable, you're going to take more risks, and you're not going to be afraid of failure. You're not afraid of failure. Much better outcomes can come from that. You can do much greater things as a whole. And that's just it. I think there's a lot of ego in this game. I think there's a lot of ego anywhere you look in the world. If you're able to put your ego aside and acknowledge that you're human, we all breathe the same air. I'm weird, you're weird. Be who you are. Self-expression and self-confidence, and those are the types of things that are going to lend to you getting the most out of your intern, you getting the most out of your coaching staff. If they're comfortable with who they are and they're comfortable around the people that they're with, they're going to trust you, and you're going to trust them. And I don't know, it's not that cut and dry. It's not chemistry where you mix this with this and then you have this. But if those are the things that you can get, like, that's where special teams are created.
No doubt. And I mean, you touched on the kind of intellectual curiosity that you guys seek out. And I'm a huge fan of that. I know Kyle, same thing, the growth mindset, we're big proponents. And it just made me think of something that here at TPA, the last several years I've worked here, the ownership group has always said, got to first get the right people on the bus, then put them in the right seats. And it seems like that's kind of the mindset for you guys too. Just get the right people, and then we'll kind of let their strengths show, and then we could put them in the right seat to kind of make the whole bus go as smooth and efficiently as possible.
100%. I mean, last year we had one kid who just finished his freshman year at University of Georgia. We call him Lil J. And then we had Eric Peterson, who was 26 and just finished up playing pro ball, and it was like day one, I remember Lil J found out that, Eric had just finished playing pro ball, and he was like looking up his stats, and you got drafted, and he was all excited. And then, 2 weeks later, these guys are working side by side. Just, there's no ego there, and again, they were both so comfortable with each other, and they, like, Lil J was teaching Eric things, Eric was teaching Lil J things, and that's just widely what the culture was last summer, and it was awesome. I've got nothing but good things to say about all 12 of the interns from last summer. They all, in their own right, did a tremendous job. So
Yeah, and you talked about the human element. I think you've mentioned it 5 or 6 times now, which is really cool because I think that's lost in translation when it comes to all of the analytics side. I think the when you mention analytics, people immediately gravitate towards, oh, this guy's like a robot and he doesn't have a human component to him. And that creates a little bit of a rift in our game. But if we can be more open to being weird, to use your words, and not everybody has the same backgrounds and not everybody's the cool cat, but they all have a story and they all have something to provide, if you attack the human element, and that just brings out people's strengths so much more, and then it allows for them to you as an apartment to attack their weaknesses a little bit more because you've created that relationship. And that goes all the way to player development, to staff development. And I don't speak on this because I certainly know it all. And that's, I think I could speak more to it because that's something that I've realized in the last couple of years and is really kind of hit home. And it's something that I continue to work on and get better at. So it's really, really cool to hear you, say those 2 words, human element, multiple times. And then it's kind of funny to hear you say "be weird" a couple of times. That's an awesome mentality to have, and it's really, really cool to hear you say that. We'll finish up with this question, and we ask a lot of our coaches that we have on the show, what is their why? Why do they do what they do? And I think I know what you're going to say for your answer because you've alluded to it multiple times, but ask you, what is your why? Why do you do what you do? And why will you continue to do what you do?
Yeah. It just comes out of caring about people, you know? Um, and every day I'm granted an opportunity, whether it's, with USA Baseball as an organization, with our interns, with interns in other parts of the office. I remember being an intern and, people being willing to have conversations with me and teach me things. And, that meant a lot to me. And that's something that I want to continue. And I try and do it as much as I can, not just our interns, but getting around the office and talking to the other interns. What do you guys want to do? They don't know. I didn't know. I still don't know. But you got to look to people for guidance. And if I can provide like a little bit of direction for an intern in another part of the office because we had a conversation about something and it sparked some interest, again, like that's what I'm here for. Same thing with players. If I'm out, around a cage and, guys are taking BP and you're just having like a one-off conversation with a player and, all of a sudden you've kind of like, you see the light bulb turn on about something. Maybe it was, how does the single leg jump test relate to me hopping into the batter's box here and taking a cut in BP? Well, strong front side, if your if you're a right-handed hitter and your left leg's strong, then, that's going to help you get to your power. That's going to help you execute your power better, that type of deal. Right. And it's just like, that's why I do it. I don't go stand around the cage with the iPad and just collect, data. I mean, I could do that, but I do my job and I like to get out and I like to talk to scouts and I like to talk to players and coaches and interns and everything because I'm genuinely interested in, again, the human element, the human beings around the game. But yeah, you care about people and it's fulfilling. I guess I'll tie it all up with this, and I'm sure this isn't an original concept, but I didn't read this anywhere and it just kind of popped into my head. Like in your average 24-hour day, you've got 8 hours of sleep, 8 hours personal time, 8 hours of work. Generally speaking, I know for us that's probably a little bit more unbalanced at other times of the year, but are you getting 8 hours of sleep? Are you getting 8 good hours of sleep? Check. Right. There's not a whole lot you can do there other than, either get 8 hours of sleep or not. I mean, some people just can't sleep, whatever that looks like. But check on that. 8 hours, are you fulfilled in your work life? And the answer for me has always been yes. And again, incredibly fortunate. I wake up every morning to an alarm clock, and I never hit the snooze button, and I haven't hit the snooze button. And it doesn't matter if it's Saturday or if it's Monday or if it's Thursday. You know, people are like, oh, I got the Sunday scaries, and like, oh, I got a case of the Mondays, and like, oh man, it's only Wednesday. This has been a really long week. I don't get that. And again, internal compass, intuition, like that's my head hitting the pillow every night saying, all right, I'm doing something that fulfills me because I sleep easy, I wake up easy, I enjoy what I do. And then you've got that last component, which is the 8 hours of the day when you're not working and when you're not sleeping. That's your personal life. And is that fulfilled too? Because, you know, obviously balance and like check. You know, I've got so many amazing human beings in my life, you know, family, friends. So I guess like in terms of like 888, 24 hours, like right now on a day-to-day basis, I don't really feel like I'm lacking in any of those places. And it all ties back to the why of, you know, do I have an opportunity to spend time with people that I care about while I'm awake every day? And the answer is yes.
And that's the beauty of baseball and working in sports, or just even doing something you're passionate about. And I think you've probably found, I know I certainly have, a ton of that same characteristic when it comes to coaching other people. You know, we don't get into this profession, and again, cliche, to make millions of dollars. Some do, but it's about the relationships. It's about um, doing something you're passionate about that you love to do, because then you won't hit the snooze button. I personally hit the snooze button a lot, I'm not going to lie, but I certainly love to do what I do and passionate about it. And that's what allows us to put the 16-hour days in on certain days to grind it out and help someone else, and then do something you're passionate about. So I love that answer, man. That was phenomenal. So I know you have a hard crunch time, so we'll let you get out of here, but thank you so much for your time, Matt. There's a lot of value. It gives some insight on what USA Baseball is about, what the PDP is about, the metrics you guys capture, but then more importantly, who Matt Pajak is as a person. And I'm thoroughly impressed. I know our working relationship in the last couple of years, I've always been impressed with the way you go about your business, and you've always been someone that's easy to talk to, an open book, and someone that responds very, very quickly as well. And that through your work, you can see that you're passionate about it. So best of luck to you in the future, man. And thank you so much for coming onto the show. We really, really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Definitely be in contact soon, always cooking something up. So,
Love it.
Absolutely, man. I really appreciate you coming on, Matt. It's a guy that always makes you think a little bit deep, introspective thought. So we appreciate having you on, brother.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.